All right. Admit all. Admit all. Welcome,
Hello.
welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Always such a joy to my heart to see everybody come on into the Zoom room. Welcome. You can put in the chat where you're zooming in from. That's always wonderful to see where everybody's coming in from. So if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're zooming in from and just a hello. And when we open up for questions, on the bottom bar there's that raise hand option. That's what we will be using because it's impossible. I don't want to miss anybody raising their hand. So if anybody doesn't know where that raise hand is, it's just along the bottom, and sometimes it's with the heart reaction and sometimes it's next to it, but you should find it if you click around that heart. Wonderful. All right. All right, beautiful. Let's see what we got here. California. Oh, Sarasota. I'm Sarasota. South Carolina. Wow, look at all of those, Brooke.
Yeah, so fun.
Look
Welcome
at all
everyone.
of those.
Awesome to
So
see you.
welcome, everyone.
Familiar faces and people I don't know. So hi, everybody.
Yes, welcome new friends, welcome old friends, welcome everybody, welcome dear friends. Welcome, dear friends, and thank you for joining us today for another Zenful conversation. I always like to think of this space as a circle, rather not really an interview, and a place where we sit together heart to heart, listen, reflect, and be inspired. My name is ZenJen Brown, and today I'm honored to welcome Brooke Warner to our studio. Welcome, Brooke. Thanks so
Thank
much for
you.
joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you said yes. And one of the things I love about Brooke is that her work is not just about books, it's about honoring women's stories, creating space for voices that deserve to be heard, and believing that what we write matters. Brooke is the publisher of She Writes Press and a true champion of women's voices. She is the co-founder of She Writes Press, a mission-driven, female-run, hybrid publishing house, sorry about that is transforming the landscape for women authors. Brooke is a visionary in the publishing world, former executive editor at Seal Press, a publishing coach, TEDx speaker, author of several books, and an unwavering advocate for women's voices. She has spent her career championing stories that matter, especially those that have too often been dismissed, delayed, or denied by traditional publishing standards. So in 2012, she co-founded She Writes Press as a response to the growing barriers women face in traditional publishing. And what followed was a bold new path, a collaborative model that gives authors full creative ownership and the editorial excellence of a traditional publishing house, with national distribution now through Simon & Schuster and a growing list of award-winning titles. She Writes Press is an industry innovator and empowering force working hard to elevate women's voices. Brooke, thank you and welcome again.
Thank you. I love all the doorbell rings because it makes me feel like people are still coming. They're like, someone's at the door. Let them in.
Let me ask you, before we dive into conversation, I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself in your own words and maybe share what feels most alive for you in your work right now.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, and I just also want to say, like, ZenJen and I got connected because of the work that I do with Mark Nepo, and I think a lot of you know that I am very close to Mark, and we do a lot of webinars together, and I have a special relationship with him. And so then she let me know that she was connected to one of our authors who's here, Celeste. Hi, Celeste. And then that connection happened. And so that just, I felt like I wanted to share that because so much of what I do is about connections, the way people make themselves or find their way to She Writes is almost always through other authors and writers in our community. And we have such a special community, and some of the authors here are She Writes authors and Spark Press authors, who's our other imprint, and have done some events together over the years or have just been connected over the years. And so I do have like a very strong core value of community, and it's become, a big community, and certainly has taken on a life of its own and lots of different ways that has splintered out. But at the core of this, I think that, people coming together with this, their own shared value of community, but also wanting to put their words out into the world, finding different ways of getting story. And of course, we do a lot of memoir, so personal narrative as well. And it's been an incredible ride so far. And we're 14 years in here on She Writes Press, and I think a lot of years to go. So I'm just pleased to be able to be in a space with this group of people and a bunch of authors and writers who want to talk about anything in that sphere. So wherever this conversation goes, ZenJen, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, me too. And thank you. Thank you for that. We are fans of Mark Nepo here. In fact, last year, I read in 2024, I read the Book of Awakening every day virtually to the community,
I love
to our
that.
Zenful Conversations community. Such an awesome book. And I saw that Sherry had mentioned that also. Let me just go ahead first right away. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask right away before we get started on anything? And again, please, if you would use that raise hand feature at the bottom in the toolbar. And if you do not know how to use that, just come off the microphone for a moment and I will see if we could help you out there. Okay. Okay. Not quite yet. Okay. Well, do you want to, Brooke, just say something to get us started, or do you want me to ask you a question?
Yeah, why don't you prompt me? I would love that. It's a little easier, I think, I could go any direction, but I think being in conversation and kind of knowing what is striking you would be great for me.
Well, I'm looking at the description that I put, and I like to just go by that to make sure we answer everything that was in the description itself. And what does it actually mean to take authorship of your own story and your publishing journey? What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I've just been giving it actually so much thought this week because I I write this weekly Substack, and now I have a community called Memoir Nation. And so I feel like I'm writing even more because my co-founder and I, Grant Faulkner, are writing content for Memoir Nation. And we had a very interesting synergistic thing happen this week because we re-airing our interview with Amanda Knox. And Amanda also has this series coming out called The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox that is coming out on Hulu in 2 days. And so this timing was kind of serendipitous to be thinking about Amanda's story. And for those of you who haven't read her book, it's called Free, and it's about reclaiming the narrative of what happened. And so I was re-listening to Amanda's interview in preparation for re-airing it. And she said something really fascinating about this notion of narrative foreclosure, which is a concept that means that your story is over, that there is no future, that, if you get to a place of despair, or if someone, steals your story from her, which is what happened to her because she was falsely convicted. And I started thinking about that happens to trauma survivors, it happens to survivors of abuse and all kinds of things. And so I'm so immersed in memoir. And then last week, I spent an inordinate amount of time because I got a cease and desist letter for one of our memoirs, which is not super uncommon, but over the course of She Writes Press, we've probably gotten six cease and desist letters. And it usually always happens because a family member wants to silence the memoirist. And that was exactly what this is. You know, it's a brother wanting to silence his sister. And it was really actually quite powerful thinking about it in this vein of narrative foreclosure, because our author said, you know, this matters to me that I reclaim the story of what happened. And I could not have told this story without the foundation of abuse that was there, because I would have had a different life if it hadn't happened. And so what was really moving for me was how we, myself, she, my business partners, all rallied around and said, we are going to bat for this author. This matters. This story matters. And so this is just kind of on my mind, I think, as a motivating force. I mean, it's certainly not the only force behind She Writes Press and what we do, but there's a lot of threat to our stories. You know, there's the threat from ourselves of just silencing or censoring ourselves, fear of outcome, fear of not being good enough. And then there's threat from outsiders who say, you shouldn't do that. Why are you bothering? Or in the worst case scenarios, literally trying to silence you by sending cease and desist letters or suing you in the absolute worst case. And so being a part of that defense last week just made me feel like this is why we do what we do. You know, we're breaking patterns of abuse. We are allowing people to tell the stories that they need to be told, that are truthful stories, but this extends to fiction as well. Some people need to fictionalize their stories. And even if you don't have an abuse narrative or something that is scary to put out into the world, it's still scary to put your words into the world because you are getting a reaction from other people, and people have shame attacks when they put their words out into the world. I mean, I have that even occasionally on a weekly basis, just doing my Substack, and it could be quite innocuous sometimes, but I'm, you know, it's very vulnerable. So I think taking ownership of your authorship is really just about showing up and doing the work and realizing it is scary sometimes, and we do it anyway, and that it really matters both to us as authors of our own stories, and it matters to the people whose stories we reach. And that's what I was thinking about with our author. Like, she is going to impact other people who have survived sibling abuse, and it's not a topic that is spoken about widely enough because people are terrified of exactly this. And so it's just an example to say, you know, I wanted to anchor it in an example that is very, you know, present and relevant to me in this moment, but this is really why I do what I do, and also why I love memoir so much. And I love fiction too, and poetry, but it all really stems from the same place, you know, which is personal truth. And so, yeah, there's that in a nutshell, and more to say about it, but it matters. It matters that we
Well, yeah, that was actually part of my questions I had down for a little bit later on. Let me just address Gail says, what exactly does cease and desist letter mean?
Yeah.
Are they asking you to take the book off the market?
Yeah, exactly. They said stop publication, and we
Mm-hmm.
said no. In many
Yeah.
words than that. It was a $800 letter, but no, no, no.
Right. Well, but that you know that is one of the questions, was what continues to fuel you in this work, you know, of championing women's voices. And that was it. When you take away all your titles, because you've got a lot of titles, what's the deeper why that keeps you showing up for these stories? And it's just because it's right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the stories matter to me. I think there is something about the power of putting our, I mean, it's interesting that we're connected through Mark, because I've been working with Mark a long time, and I have listened to him teach for hours and hours and hours and hours. And he's been a big influence on me. And one of the things that he's said that's so powerful is that our expression is our birthright. And I love that, because we were born to self-express. And there are all kinds of places along the journey where we get told, don't, you can't, you're not allowed to. Other messages, you're too big for your britches, how dare you, don't air the dirty laundry, 1,000 messages, I've heard them all. And any one of those can be an attack and we internalize it. And so I think when we then come out and say, no, we are doing this work and we're publishing it and we're putting it out into the world, it's so brave. And when I get in touch with
It
that,
is.
I'm very moved, and in my day to day, sometimes I'm just, grinding and I can't get in touch with that. But this is why these kinds of circles and me being in person, as I was recently in Park City, some of you were there. Those moments are so touching for me because I get to reconnect with just how courageous it is and that we're choosing to do this and we're showing up to do it. And there are a million other things we could be doing or not doing, right? And so this act of bravery to put our work out into the world, it does fuel me, really. And it motivates me. I don't get tired of it, even though I do get tired of certain other elements of my job.
Yeah, I come to the writing as a therapist, a yoga therapist, coming to it from the therapy aspect of it, because it's in all of the plans, whatever plan, there's going to be some writing. We need to
Mm,
decipher and move and understand ourselves by writing. So that's why I've jumped into it a little bit more. And it sounds to me you take that and actually allow people to really do something with it, because we can only hold it in so long. And also, from what I understand, writers need to write. It's a need
mhm.
to write and to get this out. So I do thank you for what you're doing. J.L. Wright had his hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So my question is, because
Oh,
we're
thank
always
you.
going to run into the problems with memoir
Mhm.
of has She Writes actually suggested that anyone fictionalize their books or supported them in fictionalizing their books to make them eligible to move forward more safely?
We haven't. I mean, I think that the way to move forward more safely is to get it legally vetted. You have to, of course, know what your personal risk tolerance is. I mean, we wouldn't, if someone said to me, I fear for my safety, I would want to have a conversation with that person. But I think what people are really fearing is fallout, or being sued, which is not the same as fearing for your safety. And so because we publish so much memoir, I am not a champion of fictionalizing memoirs unless the author wants or needs to, in which case that is perfectly up to them. And it's not my place to tell them to do that. But as a personal champion of memoir, I've spoken about this a lot. I think the fact of memoirs being true changes the culture. It's something that is very important because when I see, I mean, I am not a survivor of sibling abuse, thank goodness, I guess, for me. But, if I were and I read this book, I would feel less alone. And in reading the book, it's also just knowing that this exists, right? I mean, so much of what memoir is stuff that has been sidelined or that, you have been dismissed for, or you have been betrayed, or you have been, fill in the blank of whatever has happened to you as a result of your story and your lived experience. And so putting that into the world, it's very healing for the writer, but that's certainly not the only reason to do it. I mean, it also really does change behaviors and shines a light onto things that are oftentimes, stigmatized, or that is made to, that we're made to feel ashamed of something that is not our shame to carry because these things happen to us. Someone interrupted our life story, like Amanda said. Amanda, I do encourage you listening to that podcast because she, of course, spent 4 years in prison and, was essentially brutalized for something that she didn't do. And what she was saying was, I kind of thought my life was over. Like I didn't think that there was anywhere to go from here. And so for her, reclaiming that narrative and putting the story out into the world has been incredibly life affirming and has kind of allowed her to even continue to survive. So I see that in memoir all the time. But back to your question, I mean, if you need to fictionalize something, that no one should tell you not to do that. But I actually think the same is true for no one should tell you to fictionalize. Because it's more common that people are telling you to fictionalize because they want you to obscure the truth. And so the only reason, in my opinion, to fictionalize is because, again, you have an inside of you want to.
Thank you,
Mhm.
Brooke.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's dulling our shine to make somebody else feel more comfortable.
Right.
Although it is really, really scary in my mind to share something like that. But
Right.
I think there is a little bit of leeway in the whole memoir anyway. There is a little bit of I won't say fuzziness that you can. It's not an autobiography where it's strictly facts, and there is a little bit. Miss Linda M.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Linda. Yes.
Yes,
Hi.
ma'am.
Just want to say I'm honored to be able to have a chance to talk with you, Brooke. I have actually 3 questions, and I'll start with the one that probably is more mainstream, which has to do with I read your Substacks on AI,
Hmm.
and I was fascinated with that because I'm not an AI person. I'm like 70. And so I'm like, oh, what is this? But because I'm writing a memoir, and I've been working on it for several years actually, and I sometimes get my daughter and my son to give me input because I feel like when I'm writing about it, I don't have a lot of
Hmm.
I have a lot of people to give me input, but I don't have that kind of input where grammar, punctuation, and that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
I'm wondering how important that is because I am thinking of submitting my memoir to the contest, which I
Hmm.
think I have like 10 days or less to do
Yeah,
that.
get
But
it
in
in
any
there.
case, I just wonder, is that cover like running it through for punctuation or what do you think? What are your ideas on that?
Yeah, no. I mean, you can share your manuscript with your kids or with an editor. I mean, and books are ghost written, by the way. I mean, what I
Hmm.
object to with AI is people putting their manuscript or their words into a machine, that has been essentially taught how to write and think by reading all of the great writers of the world, and there's
Mm,
no attribution, there's no sense of consequence, there's no acknowledgement that, in essence, what is being spit back to you has to be some form of collective plagiarism, and so it's a very complicated topic, and not everybody feels as strongly as I do, but if you want to work with an editor, with your kids, with spell check, even Grammarly, I think that these are tools that, even though Grammarly is a form of AI, to strengthen your writing. But what I'm very concerned about right now is people not writing. They're really
yeah.
kind of putting prompts into the machine and then taking what comes back and literally cutting and pasting it and calling it their own. And that is where we're headed. And it's
Mm,
very distressing.
yeah.
So no, let your kids help you. That sounds great. Get your work in for the contest. We'll look forward to reading it.
Yeah. Well, I
Uh,
have another question about that. Would it be wise? My memoir is, I probably have about 30,000 words, and I already expressed my terror in trusting my own grammar and that kind of stuff. But I'm wondering if I submit it like this year and it's very rough, and then maybe it doesn't get selected, although I'm hoping it would get selected. Um, can I resubmit the same manuscript again? Yes.
you may.
Okay. All right. Then I have one more question.
Okay.
Now, what I'm writing about, being a woman of color, I'm writing about the experience. The title I have is called The Only One in the Room, which is being almost always, because I was raised in a particular way, the only person of color in a venue from the time I was little all the way up to now in this room where there's a few people of color. But, it's always that, like, just a few. And when I try to express my uncomfortableness to people and people who are allies toward those issues, they really don't get it. I mean, it's kind of a kind of an above the radar thing that happens. So I've just taken stories and put it together that way. So I'm wondering, I guess my question was, if I submit it, I can resubmit it and that kind of thing. And how do I get an editor of color who could read what I'm writing? Because I feel like that feedback is so essential and I've been searching for it.
Well, I know a couple of great Black women editors in particular. If you want to email me, and
I
ZenJen's
will.
out my email, so I can put you in touch with them for sure. I think that's right. Just to name it, say this is who I'm looking for, this is what I'm looking for. I
Mm-hmm.
also love what you're saying, Linda, to put that experience out into the world, because that's the only way that any of us who don't feel or know an experience can begin to feel or know an experience, is to read it through your words. And that's something, as we're talking about all of this, that I didn't even say, because I was talking about abuse narratives and all this other stuff. But one of the things I love about memoir and personal story is, if I don't have your lived experience, you're doing this act of generosity to say, hey, step into it, come feel it, come see what it feels like. And I've read so much more literature by authors of color in the recent years, and it's been so eye-opening and wonderful. And so I commend you. And yes, if not this year, next year, or the year after that, just keep coming back, please.
Thank you.
And
Mhm.
good luck.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Thanks, Linda. We have Gail, but let me just see here. There's a couple questions here. Okay, Brooke, you.
Well, I'm seeing that people want to know where I think the current state of the publishing industry is, and that at least one other person is here for that reason. So we can, if you want to go there now.
Whatever you want to do, and then we can take Gail after that. You answer that.
Well,
Or
Gail,
do
you want to go ahead if you're kind of still in the vein of the other stuff, and then I'll pivot to that afterwards, or no, you're ready? Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, about the publishing industry, I mean, it's interesting. Like, we're publishing is in a fraught place, I guess I would say. That for a long time, publishing has been consolidating. And so what you see is a lot of acquisitions and a lot of, for years. In fact, I think that the big five in particular has been very, very risk averse. They haven't wanted to touch anything that they don't think that they can sell a lot of copies of, which makes sense. I mean, I also forgive them for being so business minded, but it's also challenging because they don't take a lot of risks. And the way that they don't take risks is by deciding that the primary people that they are going to publish are people who are already known, or who have big platforms, or who have a lot of followers. And then, obviously, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, we saw some movement in the social justice circles that impacted book publishing in a very positive way. And I thought, in 2000, all the way until recently, that there had been a real sea change in publishing to at least be publishing more authors of color. So speaking to Linda's topic, and our STEP contest is, excuse me, about publishing authors of color. And so that was a good thing. But of course, now we're in this backlash moment because of the current administration, and because, basically, I do think that Trump's language is giving permission to industries all over the place to say, oh, don't have to think about that anymore. Great. Thank God that's over. And so I think it's going to have, this impact in book publishing, where it's like, and we see these things, they do ebb and flow, because anything that you see happening in the publishing industry is sort of a trend. And people were saying that with all these voices of color that were coming out, like, oh, well, we hope it sticks. But it probably is not going to be forever. You know, it's probably is a trend. And so I think we are seeing the end of that trend, unfortunately. And so it's really incumbent on the people who believe that it matters to continue to publish diverse voices. And certainly there are people in the publishing industry who are very, very committed to that. From another standpoint, I will just say, because of myself, and my authors know this, I just went through a big change of joining forces with some other publishing publishers to join forces to come together under what is essentially a book group. You know, so there's 6 imprints that are now housed under a book group. And the reason that I made that choice was for forgive me that I use the word safety, but it's because it's not personal safety by any means, but kind of hedging our bets, you know, in the sense that publishing is very volatile. Every publisher that I know that is a traditional publisher this year is down a lot, you know, sometimes as much as 20%. People are scared, you know, people feel like they're not going to be able to continue to be viable. Amazon is such a juggernaut that it makes this situation where all of us are sort of beholden to Amazon and their whims and their choices, which means that those of us who want to survive have to make hard decisions or smart decisions. My authors also know that we moved our backlist to Open Road, which is a company that optimizes price points and stuff. And the reason I'm making these decisions is because I do feel, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do feel that I have my finger on the pulse of a fast changing publishing industry that is very volatile and very, you know, open to free fall moments. And so what you have to do then is, I think, join forces with other smart people, take, you know, informed risks, look for opportunities where they exist. And for authors, you know, I would say it's important to be open to all the possibilities, that it's not just one particular publishing path that is right for you. And I've said this for forever. I mean, you might have an opportunity to traditionally publish, to hybrid publish, to self-publish. There is no one right path, not only for you, but for any given book. And so that is kind of exciting. The landscape is dynamic and there's a lot going on, but you can't sit there and just fall asleep at the wheel. You know, you got to like be looking around and say, okay, what can I do? What should I do? Be saying yes to things, be saying no to things, and keep having these conversations, because the publishing industry is volatile, but there are also a lot of really interesting and creative people who are coming up with new ideas all the time and stuff. It's sometimes you might say it's trending, but it's also sometimes about like, oh, I'm going to try, you know, this opportunity to see if I can sell more books. And sometimes that stuff works and you ride that wave for a little while and then it ends. And so you got to just be open to saying yes, I think, when the opportunities present themselves.
Linda says, when you said publishers are down by 20%, are you referring to revenue sales? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Net revenue. Yeah. Revenue and sales, not number of titles.
And Gail, you had your hand. Did that answer your question, or would you like to say something, please?
It was just a quick thought I had about the whole AI conversation. And, you know, I can't even imagine why a memoirist would want to use AI. You know, it's like you're trying to get to the deepest recesses of your soul. But I guess maybe it's probably that they don't feel secure about their writing. I mean, I guess maybe it comes down to that, because I can't imagine why you're a memoirist, you know.
Well, I think what happens, I mean, I can speak to, because I've seen it, you know, I've talked to a couple of people, they, they're seeing it as an editor, you know, or as something that is enhancing their work. We are using that language AI enhanced, and then they think that it's making them sound better. I don't know that I agree with that though. I have someone in my class right now who, just as an experiment, because she wanted to try it out, was like, here's my submission without AI and here's my submission with AI. And I read them back to back and I told her, and it's completely true, I much prefer yours. It's not so glossy or something. I mean, just some of the word choices. And she was like, well, my stuff feels a little raw. And I was like, I like the raw. You have a raw story. Like, let this be your voice that is
Right,
through, right? So I think you're right, Gail. You've touched upon like a lack of confidence. And also maybe perhaps combined with lack of discernment, right? Not being able to discern the difference between what is good enough, you know, and therefore, and
right.
of course, you know, all writers fall into that, because you're like, well, what should I do? And it takes a long time to really hone that level of confidence in your own work and to know your voice.
Yeah.
It's not going to always, I mean, it's certainly not going to happen for a debut memoirist, but for someone who's written a lot of books, I mean, anyone I know who's written many books is like, no on the AI, you know, like just
Yeah.
I got this. Thanks anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you may remember that I am a ghostwriter and I
Mhm.
specialize in women's memoir. And so
Yes.
it's like my job is to embody that author and like just get into like what do they want to say. I mean, that once the manuscript is done, it's going to be copy edited, it's going to be made better, but that's the whole idea. I mean, a machine can't do that, can't get to your soul. It just, I don't know, it irks me, but I guess it just comes to that confidence level. I guess I could understand that if you're unaware, you know, like you're not confident about your writing, and you said the discernment piece. I guess that's,
I'm trying to be empathetic to understand where people are coming from, and, you know, just opening the conversation, because I think we could start an irked club, you know. It is very annoying, and there's not much we can do about it. So, you know, I think just continuing to raise awareness around it and just be like, well, it's not no big deal. It is a big deal, and it's also going to really change. It's going to change the way this industry operates, and I don't like that.
yeah, I'm with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. Thanks so much, Gail. Katie,
You're
you're on
mute.
mute, sweetheart. You're still on mute there.
Let me see if I can, there we go.
There
I'm
you go.
sorry. I thought I was waiting for the to be unmuted by the person
You are
in
now
charge.
unmuted. Go for it.
Thank you so much, Brooke, for it's a pleasure to speak to you. I'm most interested in what you were just saying regarding the publishing industry and the volatile nature of the publishing industry right now. As a time to release a book. I am a independently publishing author, and have my own small publishing company that I set up, and I'm about to release my third book. And I'm always looking for ways to do PR, and I wonder what advice or help you might give me. Uh, It seems like the PR and marketing venues for independent authors have expanded a great deal just in the last 5 years since my last book was released. So, any thing you could say, and how does an independent author really get the word out about their book nowadays? What is the best venues
Well,
and
you're asking a big question. And so the number one thing is you have to start early. And I don't, you know, I mean, you're more experienced, so you probably know, but oftentimes independent authors, they write the book and publish the book, and then they get started with PR, and they don't realize that they really should have started 6 to 8 months in advance, if not more than that. So of course, starting early is a big deal. there are a lot of offerings out there. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of publishing, I mean, speaking of trends, has just been flooded with all manner of people offering author services, and it can be very difficult to discern who is legitimate and who is not just out to take your money. And I think that's even more so on the marketing and publicity side, frankly, just because there's so much. So I think you have to really do your due diligence, ask for references, talk to other authors, find someone that you trust. I mean, at She Writes, we vet people. And so one of the things that I feel good about is that there are people that we recommend for publicity and marketing that we have used on previous books, that I have seen their results. So I'm more than happy to share our author handbook with anyone in the room who is not a She Writes author who wants to look at that stuff, because at least it's a curated list of human beings. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right to be cautious, but I'm also not a publicity and marketing expert. And so I can't sit here and say, like, here's the best, bang for your buck. But certainly, I do think in general, the books that seem to do the most, that do the best, and this is not like anything profound to say, are ones where we're really casting a wide net and getting just a lot of different kinds of publicity and marketing hits. So it's not the case that it's like used to be back in the day, like you get on the Today Show, you get this one big hit, and then it's like, oh, we're successful now. Now it's more sort of the scatter shot, try to get as much out there as possible. And so as an author, that requires you to be thinking, social media and doing a lot of writing and constantly showing up. And I think that's why people like Substack, because there's a way to reach an audience. And it's always been challenging, but now there's more noise.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I've already started a Substack and been writing on that. And I would be very interested in being able to get your author handbook that you've offered. And so I hope before the meeting closes, you'll let us know how we can.
Yeah, I think I can actually upload it here. I'll try that.
Yeah, I will send that out also
Okay.
in the replay when I send a replay tomorrow. And I might suggest, not that I'm a marketing expert either, but I might suggest seeking out these interview type things and that go on podcast and YouTube. There's plenty of people doing it that help spread the word as well. But thank you so much there, Katie. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Miss Linda M.
I'm back again. Gail said something that made me realize that I'm not of this publishing world, and some of the things she said, I'm not sure exactly what it is. So I'm asking Brooke, what is the relationship between a copy editor and the author? I mean, how is that relationship, and how deep do they go in helping that person, and just kind of how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the copy editor. Some copy editors are very heavy-handed, some are light-handed. When I work with authors, I try to ascertain what level of edit they want, and sometimes we do sample edits to make sure that it's a good fit. But this is not a science, and Gail was talking about ghostwriting, right? And like that's someone obviously who is writing your story. And that's, sometimes people will evoke ghostwriters in this whole AI situation and say, well, how is it any different from having a ghostwriter write my story for me? And I think it is incredibly different, because the ghostwriter is really, entering into a sacred contract with you, and really interviewing you. And as Gail said, embodying your voice. A line editor is just trying to make your sentences sound better. But you don't want them to co-opt not co-opt, but like level your voice. Like sometimes we have that happen where people will come back and say, this editor it's too much. I feel like my voice is being lost. And so you need to be an advocate in the process for your own voice, and also if somebody is too heavy-handed, like we'll come back and say, whoa, like hold your horses here. It's too heavy. And that happens a lot, where we kind of have to manage what we want editors and proofreaders to do. So I think it's really, I appreciate that you asked that question, Linda, because there's something going back to what Gail was talking about with regard to confidence and discernment. And sometimes when you're a debut author and you don't have that confidence and discernment, then editors can really not even because they're not good people, but like they can kind of take over, you know, and it can be too much. And so you want to be mindful of finding the right fit and someone who makes you sound better, but who doesn't derail what you're trying to do.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Linda. Lynette?
Hi, everyone. So I'm a published author now. Ooh, ooh, thanks to She Writes Press. My book came out last year. And just to let you know, I think it was Linda that was speaking. As you can see, I'm a person of color, woman of color. And my book is Escape Plan, Dreaming My Way Out of the Projects. And it tells my story of growing up in the segregated South and becoming a physician. That was my escape plan. The key that I wanted to say here is that I met Brooke. Brooke helped me. I did not even think about whether people were white or black or whatever. I wanted someone who could understand my story, help me with my story, help me write my story, get on me when I wasn't telling how I was feeling or how does this make you feel? She sounded like a therapist all the time. So how did that affect you? But the point is, I learned so much and I tried to keep, as I've done in my life, an open mind and allow qualified people, no matter who they are, to help you because they will guide you and your voice will be heard by everyone. I've had more people that are not people of color who've read my book find something in my story that they can identify with. Has nothing to do with who I am. So I just want to say that, and I see Brooke again. I just want to thank her again. I met her in Park City again, and I'm writing another book. So this time I will follow her rules. Just go off on the deep end. So that's what I wanted to say.
Lynette, can I say one thing back to Lynette, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that, what you're saying to me, and I definitely have an open mind. I guess my concern is when I've taken my work to book groups, writing groups, what I write is, I mean, I can see that they're kind of shocked. And so I feel like, am I overboard and that kind of thing? That's why I was thinking a person of color might be a better fit for me at this point. But yeah, I think it's just sort of a place where I
think,
somehow feel isolated, even though I'm in the group when I'm in the writing groups and I'm writing about race and nobody else is writing about anything like that.
I want to make
Yeah,
sure to
Miss
say that
Linda, though,
go ahead, Zen.
just real quick, I've been in the group with you, and I'm one of the person that has heard some of your writing, and I think for me, when I'm here, when it comes across as in shock, it's because I think that I'm not sure I realize how deep or how much this affects people, you know. So it's a strong story, you have to say. It's gonna have an effect on people. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Go ahead, Brooke.
Well, thank you. That's actually very clarifying, and that I hope that helps to hear, Linda, just because sometimes, yeah, I think the thing that we think is, you know, shocking to people might in fact be something different. We don't actually know, and maybe it's worth asking people in the room what that's about so that you have that context. But I also think an instinct to be edited by a woman of color, or maybe specifically a Black woman, is also not wrong. You know, that like to have that mirrored back. And I have a lot of writers of color who want very specific kinds of editors, you know, so asking for what you want, and then also, you know, maybe having a reader or two, you know, not an editor, but like having a white friend say, you know, what parts of this feel X. And someone asked me to do that, actually. She is an Asian Chinese American woman, but she was like, could you just read this and tell me like where the parts that I'm talking about white culture like go too far or feel, you know, too aggressive or whatever, you know, and I just read it and I was, you know, there was like 2 spots that I was like, you know, right here, I felt a little twinge of something, but it didn't mean that I wanted her to take it out. You know, maybe I need to be confronted. But we were able to have that conversation. And so I think that it's you're asking the right questions.
Yeah, awesome. And Elena, thank you for your patience.
That's all right. First of all, I'd just like to say that I'm a fangirl, Brooke.
Thank you.
I've been listening and being inspired by Memoir Nation for quite a long time now. I mean, back when it was still called Right Minded.
Yeah.
I also heard you quite a long time ago at the Book Baby Conference in Philadelphia. And I have to say, for those of you who might be independently publishing, as I am, and even if you aren't, Brooke's book, Greenlight Your Book, is so helpful, and I highly recommend that you use it. Mine is very marked up, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
However, my question is, it seems like there is more of at least a sub niche now in what might be called hybrid memoir. So if you would define hybrid memoir.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because people are always putting new terms on things. And so it's another good reason to try to keep your finger on the pulse of stuff. I mean, for a long time, the hybrid memoirs have just been called like prescriptive memoirs. So they've been around for forever. But I think people like that term hybrid memoir better. And hybrid memoir, I guess, could also be more than just prescriptive. I mean, it's really anything that is straddling more than just memoir. And so, like, for instance, we interviewed someone on the podcast, Faith Adiele, who had written these hybrid memoirs. And if you've seen them, they're super cool. They're like a memoir and a screenplay and, you know, images and collage, and it just has all this stuff going on. And so that made it a hybrid because it was not, you know, specifically a memoir. So I think it's hybrid perhaps came about as a feeling that memoir itself was not capturing what people were doing and felt limited in terms of the terminology. So I embrace that. I mean, I think it's great because people are doing really creative stuff with memoir and they still want to be in the memoir house, but they're doing more than just memoir.
Great. Okay. That's where I am. I'm just wondering.
Great. There's so many good examples of it. And I think more so now than ever. So you're right in the wave.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions, comments?
Yeah, actually, Gail said Memoir Plus, and maybe Memoir Plus is the one that's prescriptive memoir. So even I have a hard time keeping track of all these new terms. It's the same thing as like, you know, when people are like, is my novel, you know, commercial, upmarket, women's fiction, you know, like beach read. I'm like, whatever you want it to be.
Linda Curtis.
Hey, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Brooke. Nice to see you. So you were mentioning earlier, you know, the state of publishing is in flux, and there are all these different ways to go. There's agents, there's independent publishing, hybrid, all, as we've discussed. For somebody like me that's published a book and had somewhat success, you know, with that, and now I'm just starting to think about another book, and I don't even know what that book would be yet. It would be personal and kind of a continuation of the story, but maybe a little bit of how-to, you know, how to leave a religion, how to have honorable closure when you have big life changes. So for somebody in my shoes, how would you recommend assessing the next, you know, the steps? Is it an agent? Is it, you know, and certainly the work we did together with She Writes was totally rewarding. That's absolutely on the table. But what else is on the table, or should I be thinking about, or even how to think about it right now?
I mean, I think I don't know that that is a different answer than I would have given 5 or 10 years ago, because I think that if you want to try to pursue the traditional route, you should, because there's first of all, no guarantee that it will happen. And, you know, I've used this same analogy forever, so forgive me for those of you who already know it, but it's the best one I can think of, which is just that it's like applying to school, you know, and so the big five are the Ivy Leagues, and the next tier down is your state schools and your, you know, maybe more likely to get in schools, and then you have community college at the bottom. They're all great. You know, you
Mhm.
get a really strong education and a positive experience, and just because you go to the Ivy Leagues doesn't mean you're guaranteed an awesome experience. And
Right.
so you also can apply to Harvard and not get in, and you're not going to be like, oh my God, I am terrible. No, it's just that you didn't have what they needed. You didn't have enough of X, Y, Z. And so I think thinking of it that way lets the helium out of the balloon a little bit, and then you can decide and you can try. And then if you get rejected from the big five or whomever you go to, because they're likely to say, I mean, not necessarily in your case, Linda, but in the reasons that people get rejected are pretty common. One, you don't have a big enough author platform. Two, we recently did a book very similar to that, so thank you very much, but not right for us right now. Three is we don't know how to sell it.
Mm.
And so go for it, but then don't spend forever there. You know, I
Right.
tell people to give themselves a timeline, like, I don't know, 6 months or maybe a year. But then, of course, you hear all these stories. You know, I just saw something on Facebook the other day, like, my perseverance, you know, is the reason that I'm here. And I've been doing this for 6 years and I finally landed a deal. And I'm celebrating those people. You know, that's awesome, but I don't want to wait 6 years. So it just depends on you and where you're at.
Right. And it sounds like it's important if you go that route to have an agent.
If you go to certain publishers, you have to. You know, it
Mhm.
will say that you have to be agented, and then if they accept unsolicited, then it means they accept unsolicited. So you look around and see what is out there, and, you know, start thinking about it well in advance for sure.
Great. Thanks, Brooke.
Yeah, good
Thank
luck
you.
to you. Yeah,
And JL,
see you.
JL had her hand up again too.
I did, but that was actually the question was how much should we just try to jump in and try to find agents then and go into it that way?
I think it just depends on, you know, a lot of times when I will assess manuscripts for people, and sometimes people want me to assess the commercial viability of their project as well. And it doesn't mean that in my personal assessment of your commercial viability, it's a yes or a no, but people in the industry can usually say, like, yeah, you know, because it's so often about author platform. And I hate to say that so bluntly, but it's really true. Like, Linda, in your case, how to leave a religion may be so niche that the right publisher would just be like, oh, this is actually really important and we're gonna put this on the list because we don't have anything, we haven't seen anything like it. But if you're writing a memoir, you know, along the lines of something that has been done many times, or you're a debut novelist, you know, with no credits to your name and no fan base, I have to tell you, and I don't mean this to be discouraging, but it's just like you're automatically facing such an uphill battle. And so again, try, because you want to knock on those doors and see what happens. But a lot of people are just kind of like, I'm just going to try other options, you know, and there's also all kinds of publishing out there, by the way. You know, I mean, there are places like university presses and small presses, but I think, you know, the notion of getting an agent and a big deal if you're in that place is pretty unlikely. And so maybe instead start with small indies and then ascertain from there, okay, if that's not going to work, then maybe hybrid or self. And then, of course, you know, I mean, just for my sake, because I'm here and I'm representing a hybrid, you know, more and more people are choosing hybrid and self as a first option. So we're just in a kind of cool place. I like to think of it like authors are free agents. And
Can I follow up with a follow-up question regarding that? So how long should that process take? And I mean, because I know self-publishing is the quick route, right? And so if I've been working on a book for 5 years and I'm getting it together and I'm willing to wait 5 years to get it published because it has merit, or I feel like it has merit, what happens, you know, then look at other options. So typically, how long would a person wait if you had the complete book and you felt like it was ready to move forward?
Are you talking about on the traditional route or?
Well, so yeah, if you were on the traditional route trying to get it onto the shelves, yeah, or trying to get it into an agent or a publisher's house within 5 years of the completion of the book. So if that doesn't happen, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't timelines, you know, I mean, that's why it's very complicated and why there's a lot of hurry up and wait in this industry. It's just, you know, we're currently acquiring for spring 2027. And so that's, you know, she writes. And so then if you talk about traditional, by the time you get an agent, you got to get the agent's got to sell the book. Then you have publishing timelines. You know, I think the fastest possible outcome for someone who gets agented in this room would be 3 years. And that would be fast. So I hope that helps, JL.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Brooke, we said this hour will go fast.
Yes.
And it has, and I knew it would. And as always, there's lots of questions left over, but I want to have one. What is the one thing that you hope every woman here takes with her from this conversation?
I mean, it has to be that you all can do this, that there is a path forward for every single person in this room, and the journey will look different and the timeline will look different. But so much about publishing, I mean, the reason that I wrote a book called Greenlight Your Book, and the reason that my TEDx talk is called Greenlight Revolution, is because the impetus to get there is from within. And so one of the things I said in my TEDx talk is like the validation has to be internal validation, and not that the external validation doesn't feel good, but it's not enough of a fuel to drive you the distance of what this takes. What this takes is all interior resources. And so just keep finding that inspiration wherever you can and go for it. And it might take the time that it takes, but that doesn't mean that you're not just chugging along and, you know, finding the heart of it. So go do it.
All right. You can find Brooke on Substack. She is on Writerly Things on Substack. Her website is brookewarner.com. That's Brooke, BROOKEWARNER. And she writes press.com. And you can email Brooke at brookewarner.com. You can find her on social media. We'll be sending out this conversation tomorrow, the replay, to everybody, along with all of her contact information. Hopefully you can send me the podcast that you were talking about that you'd like everybody to listen to, and the author handbook, and anything else you want to send along. And I do want you writers to know that I also have intimate one-on-one conversations without the live studio audience. If you'd like to come on and talk about writing, we would certainly be able to do that. And you can have that file to send out and use however you want to from there as well. But Brooke, any final, anything else you want to say before
my final words are thank you, ZenJen, for opening this space. I don't have an opportunity to just, you know, often have just an open-ended, heartful conversation like this. So thanks to everybody in the room who made that possible. And I just really appreciate this space. And I want to say to everyone, I mean, that is a very cool offering to be able to be in conversation and then have that recorded and use that, you know, little clips of that to get out to your followers. So take advantage.
Yeah, awesome. I thank you so much for joining today and joining me here, joining us here, Brooke. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share so much and loaded with information. Thank you everybody for coming and for supporting these kinds of conversations, the real, and I think if anything, it's the emotion that's needed these days, and that's what's missing in the AI is the humanness. Yeah, just keep at it. Keep in touch with your heart and your relationship with yourself. And I think we've all let ourselves down before, and it's just, we don't want to do it again. Please visit zenfulconversations.com. Sign up for more. We have a couple great conversations coming up. In a couple weeks, we have conversation on the creative process. We also have a conversation on the revision, the art of revision. So there's a couple great conversations coming up for writers specifically. So take a look at zenfulconversations.com and sign up. They're all free. They're all free. Brooke, in true deep gratitude.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you so much.
Namaste. Thank you, everyone.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.